Exile of the Queen. The Ixorian courtroom was silent, filled with tension so heavy it seemed to press down on everyone present. Queen Selena stood at the center of the grand chamber, her royal robes shimmering under the cold, artificial lights. Her deep purple skin, a mark of her royal bloodline, was now pale with fear and disbelief. The council of elders sat in a semicircle before her, their expressions a mixture of disdain and pity. Elder Varix, the head of the council, rose from his seat. His voice echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Queen Selena, you stand accused of failing your primary duty, to ensure the continuation of the Ixorian bloodline. Your inability to produce an heir has endangered the stability of our empire. Selena's voice trembled as she responded, "This is not my fault. I have served our people faithfully, defended our borders, and brought prosperity to our worlds. How can you judge me unworthy because of something beyond my control?" Her plea fell on deaf ears. Varix raised a hand to silence her. The Ixorian throne is not merely a seat of power. It is a symbol of fertility and strength. Without an heir, the throne is meaningless, and the empire is vulnerable. From the shadows, Selena's trusted advisor, Kreiner, stepped forward. But instead of offering support, his cold gaze betrayed his true intentions. "My queen," he said, his voice dripping with feigned regret, "the council's decision is final. Your infertility is a weakness, one that our enemies will exploit. For the good of the empire, you must be removed." Selena staggered back, as if struck by a physical blow. Kreiner, her closest ally, had turned against her. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, a mix of judgment and sorrow. She searched the faces around her, hoping for a sign of loyalty, but found none. She was alone. The sentence was pronounced: exile. Selena was to be banished to Korath 7, a barren and desolate planet at the edge of the galaxy, a place where no one survived for long. It was a fate worse than death. Hours later, Selena stood on the platform of the Imperial launch site, shackled and stripped of her royal insignia. The cold wind bit at her skin, but she held her head high, refusing to show weakness. The Imperial guards escorted her to a small, battered exile pod. It was nothing like the grand ships she once commanded. This was a rusted coffin designed for one-way trips. As she stepped inside, an old alien servant approached her. His eyes were milky white with age, but they held a strange intensity. In a raspy voice, he whispered, "The infertile shall rise when the galaxy bleeds." Before she could ask what he meant, he vanished into the crowd. The pod's door hissed shut, sealing her fate. The engines roared to life, and moments later, she was hurled into the void of space. Through the tiny viewport, Selena watched her homeworld grow smaller and smaller until it was just a distant star. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. If this was to be her end, she would face it with dignity. Korath 7 was everything the legends claimed it to be: bleak, hostile, and lifeless. The pod crashed onto the rocky surface, skidding to a halt amid a cloud of dust and debris. Selena unbuckled herself and stumbled out, her legs weak from the journey. The air was thin and cold, barely breathable. Jagged cliffs and endless wastelands stretched as far as the eye could see. As she surveyed her surroundings, a sense of despair began to creep in. How was she supposed to survive here? There was no food, no water, no shelter. She was a queen, trained in diplomacy and strategy, not survival. But then she remembered the servant's cryptic words. "The infertile shall rise when the galaxy bleeds." What did they mean? Was it a prophecy? A warning? Or simply the ramblings of an old man? Whatever it was, it ignited a small spark of hope within her. Perhaps her story was not over yet. She wandered the barren landscape, searching for anything that could help her survive. Hours passed, and the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows over the jagged terrain. Exhausted, Selena collapsed near a cluster of rocks, her body trembling from the cold. As darkness enveloped the land, strange sounds filled the air, Low growls and eerie screeches. She was not alone. Her heart pounded as she gripped a sharp piece of metal she had salvaged from the pod. Shapes moved in the shadows, circling her like predators. Just as she prepared to defend herself, a sudden burst of light illuminated the area. The creatures scattered, retreating into the darkness. Felina turned toward the source of the light and saw a figure standing on a ridge, holding a glowing beacon. It was humanoid, but the features were unfamiliar. The figure descended toward her, stepping into the faint moonlight. It was a human man, his face weathered but determined. He extended a hand to her. "Looks like you could use some help," he said in a language she barely understood but somehow recognized. Selena stared at him, stunned. A human, on Korath 7. And why had he saved her? She hesitated, then took his hand, realizing this might be her only chance to survive. Little did she know, this meeting would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The human rebel. The air on Korath 7 crackled with tension as Ryland sprinted through the jagged canyons, his heart pounding in his chest. The faint hum of Exorian patrol drones echoed in the distance. He cursed under his breath, glancing at the small holographic map projected from his wrist. It flickered erratically, just like the oxygen levels in his failing suit. "This is why you don't take shortcuts through cursed planets, Ryland," he muttered to himself, leaping over a narrow ravine. His ship, the Vesper, had crash-landed after a wild chase with Exorian fighters. Ryland, a human rebel and notorious saboteur, had just completed a dangerous mission, stealing classified blueprints of the Empire's newest weapon. If he could survive long enough to transmit the data to the Resistance, it could turn the tide of the war. But survival seemed less likely with every passing minute. The planet's toxic winds and unpredictable terrain weren't doing him any favors. His breathing was shallow, each step more labored than the last. Still, he pressed on, driven by sheer willpower and a deep-seated hatred for the Exorian regime. Just as the last rays of the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Ryland stumbled upon something that made him freeze in his tracks, a deep impact crater. At its center lay a battered Exorian exile pod, its surface scorched and dented. He drew his pulse rifle and approached cautiously, scanning the area for traps. The Exorians were known for their cruel punishments, and exile pods were often rigged to detonate if tampered with. But something about this one was different. The hatch was slightly ajar, and faint footprints led away from it, disappearing into the rocky terrain. Ryland crouched beside the pod, his sharp eyes scanning the interior. It was empty, save for a few scraps of fabric and a faint metallic scent in the air. Whoever had been inside was long gone, or so it seemed. Before he could investigate further, a low growl rumbled behind him. He spun around, his rifle raised, to find himself face to face with a pack of alien predators. Their sleek, black forms moved like liquid shadows, their glowing red eyes fixed on him. "Great," he muttered. "Dinner time." The first creature lunged, its razor-sharp claws aimed at his throat. Ryland fired, the pulse rifle lighting up the dark with a sharp crack. The creature dropped, but the others circled closer, undeterred. He took down another, but there were too many. They were learning, adapting to his movements. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos, a sharp, commanding tone in a language he didn't fully understand. The creatures hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering uncertainly. From the shadows, a figure emerged. She was tall and regal, her tattered cloak fluttering in the wind. Her skin glimmered faintly under the moonlight, a deep violet hue that marked her as Exorian royalty. Her piercing silver eyes locked onto Ryland's, and for a moment, he was too stunned to speak. The woman stepped forward, her presence exuding a quiet authority. She held a jagged piece of metal, a makeshift weapon, and brandished it at the creatures. With a sharp gesture, she barked another command. The pack retreated, vanishing into the darkness as if they had never been there. Ryland lowered his rifle but kept a firm grip on it. "You're welcome," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. The woman didn't reply immediately. Instead, she studied him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Finally, she spoke, her voice melodic yet cold. "You're human. And you're Exorian," Rylan shot back, his tone dripping with distrust. "What's a queen doing on a rock like this? Lose your crown." Her expression hardened. "I am no longer a queen." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "Exile, huh? Guess that makes two of us stranded on this death trap." The woman, Selena, stiffened at the mention of exile, but said nothing. Her silence spoke volumes, and Rylan wasn't sure whether to pity her or be wary of her. He'd fought against the Exorians for years, but this one was different. She didn't carry herself like a conqueror. She looked broken. Reluctantly, the two agreed to work together. Survival on Korath 7 wasn't possible alone, and Rylan wasn't about to pass up the chance to learn why an Exorian queen had been cast out by her own people. As they made their way through the treacherous terrain, Selena shared bits of her story. Her betrayal, her banishment, and the cryptic warning from the old servant. Rylan listened, though he didn't fully trust her. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something about her words stuck with him. "The infertile shall rise when the galaxy bleeds." It sounded like the kind of riddle that could either save them or doom them both. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the unlikely pair had reached a narrow canyon. Selena stopped abruptly, her eyes narrowing. She knelt and traced her fingers along the ground. "What is it?" Rylan asked, his voice tense. "Tracks," she murmured. "Large ones, not from the predators." Rylan's hand instinctively went to his rifle. "More trouble." Selena nodded, her expression grim. "Bounty hunters, sent for me." Rylan swore under his breath. He had just escaped one death trap and walked straight into another. But there was no turning back now. If bounty hunters were after her, they wouldn't spare him either. "Looks like we're both wanted," he said with a smirk, trying to lighten the mood. "Guess that makes us partners." Selena gave him a withering look. "You're not my partner. You're my liability." Rylan chuckled despite himself. "Fair enough. Let's see who gets the last laugh." As they pressed on, the canyon walls seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing deeper. Somewhere in the distance, the unmistakable hum of a hovercraft echoed through the air. The hunt was on, and neither of them knew if they'd make it out alive. Uneasy alliance. The fire crackled faintly in the biting cold of Korath 7's endless night. Selena sat on a jagged boulder near the flames, her regal posture contrasting sharply with her tattered cloak and disheveled appearance. Across from her, Rylan fiddled with his pulse rifle, his eyes darting toward her every few seconds, the unease in his body language impossible to ignore. "You've been staring at me for a while," Selena said, her voice sharp, her silver eyes reflecting the firelight. Rylan shrugged, not looking up from his weapon. "Just making sure you don't stab me in my sleep." Selena let out a cold laugh, more bitter than amused. "If I wanted to kill you, human, you'd already be dead." Rylan smirked, leaning back against the rock wall. "Well, that's comforting." The silence stretched between them, heavy and awkward. It wasn't just the natural tension between an Exorian and a human. It was the clash of two lives that couldn't have been more different. Selena, once the queen of a vast and powerful empire, now reduced to a fugitive on a desolate planet. Rylan, a rebel with nothing to lose, running from a galaxy that had already written him off. By dawn, they were on the move again. Selena led the way, her steps surprisingly sure despite the hostile terrain. Rylan followed a few paces behind, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his eyes scanning for threats. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked, breaking the silence. "There's an ancient ruin not far from here," Selena replied without looking back. "It's marked on the Exile Pod's navigation system. If I'm right, it might have supplies, or answers." "Answers to what?" Rylan pressed. She stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with intensity. to why I was betrayed, to why the Empire exiled me instead of killing me, and to what the galaxy is bleeding for." Rylan frowned. He didn't trust her, but there was something about the way she spoke, an edge of desperation, of determination, that made him curious. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "Fine. Lead the way, Your Majesty." "Don't call me that," Selena snapped, turning away. The ruins emerged from the horizon like jagged teeth, ancient and foreboding. Massive stone pillars jutted from the ground, etched with strange, glowing symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. The air here felt heavier, charged with an unexplainable energy that made Ryland's skin crawl. "What is this place?" he asked, stepping cautiously over the cracked ground. "An Exorian sanctuary," Selena said, her voice hushed. "Long abandoned. Few even remember it exists." They entered the largest structure, a cavernous hall filled with statues of Exorian figures, their faces worn smooth by time. At the far end, a massive mural depicted a violent battle between alien races, with a towering figure at the center. An Exorian queen with radiant eyes and outstretched hands, as if commanding the stars themselves. Selena's gaze lingered on the mural. "This is the prophecy," she murmured, more to herself than to Rylan. "What prophecy?" Rylan asked, his grip tightening on his rifle. She turned to him, her voice grave. "The Infertile shall rise when the galaxy bleeds. It's an ancient legend about a queen who was cursed to be barren, but destined to stop a great catastrophe." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you're trying to make this about you." Selena's jaw tightened. "I don't care what you think. But if there's even a chance this prophecy is real, it means the Empire's weapon, the one you stole plans for, is part of this catastrophe." Rylan hesitated. He had risked everything to get those blueprints, but he hadn't fully understood their purpose. Now, the pieces were starting to come together, and he didn't like the picture they formed. Before he could respond, a deep rumble shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling as the glowing symbols on the walls began to pulse faster. Is this place supposed to do that?" Rylan asked, backing toward the entrance. Selena's eyes widened. "No, someone, has triggered the sanctuary's defense system." The rumble grew louder, and a deafening roar echoed through the hall. From the shadows, a massive mechanical guardian emerged, its glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. It moved with unnatural speed, its clawed limbs tearing through stone as it charged toward them. "Run!" Selena shouted, grabbing Rylan's arm. They sprinted through the labyrinth of ruins, the guardian hot on their heels. Rylan fired his rifle over his shoulder, but the blasts barely scratched the machine's surface. "This thing's indestructible," he shouted. "No," Selena said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Its power source is in its chest. Aim for the core." "Easy for you to say," Rylan muttered, skidding to a stop and taking aim. The guardian loomed closer, its glowing core pulsating like a heartbeat. He held his breath, waiting for the perfect shot. The blast hit its mark, and the guardian staggered, sparks flying from its chest. Selena seized the moment, grabbing a jagged piece of metal from the ground and plunging it into the exposed core. The guardian let out a final, ear-splitting screech before collapsing in a heap of broken parts. Breathing heavily, Rylan turned to Selena. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" She didn't respond, her attention focused on the now dormant core. Carefully, she pried a small glowing crystal from its center. "What's that?" Rylan asked. Selena held it up, her expression unreadable. "A key to the Empire's secrets." Rylan stared at her, a mix of suspicion and admiration flickering in his eyes. "You better be worth the trouble, Queen." Selena met his gaze, her grip tightening on the crystal. "I will be, but only if you stop calling me that." The uneasy alliance between them solidified as they prepared to leave the ruins, the weight of their shared mission growing heavier with every step. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of bounty hunter hovercrafts grew louder, signaling that their troubles were far from over. The dark secret. The two moons of Korath 7 hung low in the sky, their dim glow casting eerie shadows over the desolate landscape. Selena and Rylan trudged through the jagged canyon, the silence between them punctuated only by the crunch of their boots on the rocky ground. The crystal they had taken from the ruins pulsed faintly in Selena's hand, its light growing brighter with every step they took. "You sure this thing isn't a tracking device?" Rylan asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. His pulse rifle was slung across his chest, ready to fire at the slightest sign of trouble. Selena glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "If it were, we'd already be surrounded by bounty hunters or worse." "Comforting," Rylan muttered, tightening his grip on the weapon. After hours of walking, they reached the mouth of another ruin, smaller but more intact than the one they had left behind. The entrance was sealed with a heavy stone door, its surface etched with glowing Ixorian runes that seemed to react to the crystal in Selena's hand. "This is it," she said, her voice laced with both determination and dread. Rylan raised an eyebrow. "What's it? Another death trap?" Selena ignored his sarcasm and stepped forward, pressing the crystal into a small indentation on the door. The runes flared brightly, and the ground beneath them trembled as the door slowly slid open, revealing the dark corridor that descended into the earth. Rylan peered into the darkness, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. "Why do I feel like we're about to regret this?" "Stay close," Selena said, stepping inside without hesitation. The corridor led to a vast chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings that seemed to tell a story. Selena moved toward the center of the room, where a large circular pedestal stood, its surface glowing with the same light as the crystal. She placed the crystal in the center, and the carvings on the walls lit up, their light weaving a tapestry of images and symbols. Rylan watched as the story unfolded before them. The carvings depicted the rise of the Ixorian Empire, its queens wielding incredible power. But then the images darkened, showing destruction, fire, and chaos. A weapon, a massive swirling vortex, devoured entire star systems, leaving only voids in its wake. "What is that?" Rylan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Selena's face was pale, her silver eyes wide with realization. "The Annihilator, a weapon of unimaginable power. My ancestors created it as a last resort, a deterrent against the galaxy's enemies." Rylan turned to her, his expression incredulous. "And let me guess, it's not just a relic of the past, is it?" She shook her head. "No, the weapon is active, and the Empire plans to use it." As the carvings continued to shift, they revealed another shocking truth. Selena's lineage was cursed, marked by the very weapon they had created. The Annihilator had corrupted the Ixorian royal bloodline, rendering them infertile to ensure no queen could rise against the weapon's purpose. "It's a failsafe," Selena said, her voice trembling. "The weapon is tied to the throne. Only a queen can control it, but the curse ensures no queen can survive long enough to wield it." Rylan crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "So, the Empire exiled you because you're infertile. But really, they just wanted to get rid of you before you found out the truth." Selena nodded, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. "They're using the weapon to expand their power, no matter the cost. Entire systems will be destroyed, and the galaxy will bleed for their ambition." Rylan's mind raced. He had seen the horrors of the Empire's rule, but this was something far worse. If the Resistance knew about the Annihilator, they might stand a chance. But how could they fight something that powerful? Before he could voice his thoughts, the ground beneath them began to shake. The pedestal cracked, and the glowing runes dimmed. A deep guttural growl echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Rylan raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger. What now? From the shadows, a towering figure emerged, a mechanical guardian, larger and more menacing than the one they had faced before. Its eyes glowed red, and its limbs bristled with weapons. Selena stepped back, her expression grim. The sanctuary is defending itself. It knows we've seen too much. Great, Rylan muttered, aiming at the Guardian's head. Just what we needed. The Guardian lunged, its massive claws slicing through the air. Rylan fired a burst of shots, but the creature barely flinched. Selena grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ground and hurled it at the Guardian's core, but it deflected the attack effortlessly. We can't fight this thing, Rylan shouted, dodging another swipe. We need to get out of here. Selena hesitated, her eyes darting between the Guardian and the glowing carvings. If we leave now, we'll lose the information. And if we stay, we'll lose our lives. Rylan snapped, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the exit. The Guardian roared, its footsteps shaking the ground as it gave chase. The two of them sprinted through the dark corridor, the light from the carvings fading behind them. Just as they reached the entrance, the stone door began to close. Move, Rylan shouted, shoving Selena through the narrowing gap. He dove through just as the door slammed shut, the Guardian's roar muffled on the other side. Breathing heavily, they collapsed against the canyon wall, the cold air stinging their lungs. Selena clutched the crystal tightly, her mind racing with the implications of what they had learned. Rylan looked at her, his face grim. So, what's the plan, Queen? She met his gaze, her determination returning. We find the Annihilator, and we destroy it. For the first time, Rylan saw something in her eyes that gave him hope, not just for her, but for the galaxy. Let's hope you're as good at saving worlds as you are at getting into trouble, he said, pushing himself to his feet. Selena managed a faint smile. I didn't ask for your help, human. Yeah, well, Rylan said, checking his rifle. You've got it anyway. As they disappeared into the canyon, the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath for what was to come. Betrayal in the shadows. The twin suns of Koreth 7 dipped below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows over the canyon. Selena and Rylan crouched behind a cluster of boulders, their eyes locked on the flickering light of a distant campfire. The faint hum of a hovercraft echoed through the still night air, accompanied by muffled voices. Bounty hunters, Rylan whispered, peering through the scope of his rifle. Looks like 3 of them, heavily armed. Selena narrowed her silver eyes. They've been tracking us since the sanctuary. They won't stop until one of us is dead. Rylan smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Well, that's encouraging. You've really got a way of inspiring teamwork. Selena ignored him, focusing instead on the scene below. The hunters moved with precision, setting up a perimeter around their camp. These weren't amateurs. They were professionals, likely sent by the Exorian Empire to eliminate her and retrieve the crystal. We'll have to go around them, Rylan said, lowering his rifle. Fighting those guys is suicide. No, Selena said firmly. They're here for me. If we run, they'll keep chasing us. We deal with them now, or we never stop running. Rylan sighed, rubbing his temples. You've got a real knack for choosing the hard way, don't you? The plan was simple. Rylan would create a distraction, while Selena flanked the hunters and neutralized their leader. It wasn't the most elegant strategy, but time wasn't on their side. As Rylan slipped away into the shadows, Selena crept down the rocky slope, her makeshift weapon, a jagged shard of metal, clutched tightly in her hand. The crystal pulsed faintly in her pocket, its light hidden by the folds of her cloak. Rylan's diversion came swiftly and loudly. A sudden burst of gunfire shattered the silence, followed by the sharp crack of a grenade. The hunters sprang into action, their weapons drawn as they moved toward the source of the commotion. Selena seized the moment, slipping into the camp unnoticed. She spotted the leader, a hulking alien with cybernetic implants, barking orders into a comlink. His back was turned, his focus entirely on the chaos beyond the camp. With a swift and silent motion, Selena lunged, pressing the jagged edge of her weapon against his throat. "Call them off," she hissed, her voice cold and unyielding. The leader froze, his cybernetic eye swiveling to glance at her. A slow, sinister smile spread across his face. "You think you're clever, don't you, ex-queen? But you've made a mistake." Before Selena could react, a sharp crack echoed through the air. Pain exploded in her side, and she staggered backward, clutching her ribs. One of the hunters had doubled back, sneaking up behind her with a stun baton. Raylan burst into the camp, firing wildly as he closed the distance. He dropped one of the hunters with a well-placed shot, but the others turned their weapons on him, forcing him to dive for cover. "Selena," he shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "A little help here." Selena gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain as she scrambled to her feet. She grabbed the crystal from her pocket and hurled it into the center of the camp. The glowing artifact struck the ground with a deafening hum, its light intensifying until it was blinding. The hunters cried out, shielding their eyes as the crystal unleashed a pulse of energy that sent them sprawling. Rylan took advantage of the chaos, picking off the remaining enemies with precision shots. When the dust settled, the camp was silent. The bounty hunters lay unconscious or worse, their weapons scattered across the ground. Selena retrieved the crystal, its glow dimming as it returned to her grasp. "Remind me never to question your dramatic flair," Rylan said, helping her to her feet. Selena shot him a withering look but said nothing, her attention focused on the faint hum of an approaching hovercraft. "We're not safe yet." The hovercraft appeared moments later, its sleek form cutting through the night like a predator stalking its prey. A spotlight swept across the canyon, illuminating the wreckage of the camp. Rylan and Selena ducked behind a boulder, their breathing shallow. "Looks like reinforcements," Rylan muttered. "And here I thought we'd earned a break." Before Selena could respond, the spotlight fixed on their position. A voice boomed from the craft's loudspeakers, cold and mechanical. "Surrender the queen and the crystal, and your lives will be spared." Rylan rolled his eyes. "Yeah, because that always works out." Selena's gaze hardened. "They'll kill us whether we surrender or not. We have to fight. Against a hovercraft. You're insane." Rylan protested. "I have a plan," Selena said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Follow my lead." As the hovercraft descended, Selena stepped out from cover, the crystal held high above her head. "You want this," she called out, her voice ringing with authority. "Then come and take it." The hovercraft's spotlight focused on her, and a hatch on its underside opened. A squad of armored soldiers disembarked, their weapons trained on her. Rylan watched from the shadows, his heart pounding. What was she doing? Then he saw it, the faint shimmer of energy surrounding the crystal. It was building, growing stronger with every second. Selena was baiting them into a trap. The soldiers approached cautiously, their leader barking orders. Selena waited until they were within range before she hurled the crystal to the ground. The resulting explosion of energy sent the soldiers flying and destabilized the hovercraft, causing it to crash into the canyon wall. Rylan emerged from cover, shaking his head in disbelief. "Remind me never to doubt you again." Selena allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. "You'll learn eventually." But as they scavenged the wreckage for supplies, Rylan's wrist communicator buzzed with an incoming message. The voice on the other end made his blood run cold. "Rylan," the voice said. "It's me. We need to talk." It was one of his old rebel allies, a man he thought he could trust. But the tone of his voice told a different story. The betrayal wasn't over yet. Rise of the Queen. The remnants of the hovercraft smoldered in the canyon, casting an eerie orange glow against the jagged rocks. Selena stood in the center of the wreckage, the glowing crystal still clutched in her hand. The energy from the explosion had left her shaken but unbroken. Her silver eyes scanned the horizon, alert for any signs of reinforcements. Nearby, Rylan paced back and forth, his communicator clutched tightly in his hand. The message from his old ally had been brief but clear. "Rylan, they're coming for you. And for her. You trust this guy?" Selina asked, her voice sharp as she adjusted the straps of her tattered cloak. Rylan stopped pacing and glanced at her. "I used to. Now, not so much. But if he says the Empire is closing in, we don't have much time." Selina frowned, her grip tightening on the crystal. "Then we move now. We can't let this fall into their hands." As they climbed out of the canyon, Selina felt the crystal pulse faintly in her hand. Its energy was alive, almost sentient, and it seemed to respond to her emotions. She stopped for a moment, closing her eyes and focusing on the faint vibrations. "What are you doing?" Rylan asked, his voice tinged with impatience. "Quiet," Selina said, her tone commanding. She let the energy flow through her, and for a brief moment, she saw something. A flash of light, a towering structure surrounded by swirling clouds of energy. It was the Annihilator, the weapon that had cursed her bloodline and brought the galaxy to the brink of destruction. "I know where it is," she said, her voice steady. Rylan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, you know? Did the crystal whisper it to you or something?" "In a way," Selina replied, her tone unyielding. "It's calling to me. The Annihilator is on Ixoria Prime, hidden beneath the royal palace." Rylan let out a low whistle. "Ixoria Prime. That's not exactly a quick trip, and let's not forget the Empire controls the entire planet. That's why we need help," Selina said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Your resistance. They'll have the resources we need." Rylan hesitated. The resistance wasn't exactly a unified force. They were scattered, disorganized, and distrustful of outsiders, especially someone like Selina. But he knew she was right. They couldn't do this alone. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "There's a rebel outpost about a day's walk from here. If we make it, I'll vouch for you. But don't expect a warm welcome." The journey was grueling. The barren landscape of Korath 7 offered no cover, and the constant threat of Ixorian patrols kept them on edge. Despite their shared goal, the tension between Rylan and Selina simmered beneath the surface. "You don't trust me," Selina said abruptly as they climbed a steep ridge. "Trust is earned," Rylan replied without looking at her. "And last I checked, your empire hasn't exactly been kind to my people." "My empire betrayed me," Selina said, her voice laced with bitterness. "Everything I was raised to believe in was a lie. If you think this is easy for me, you're wrong." Rylan stopped and turned to face her. "Look, I get it. You're trying to make up for what the Empire's done. But that doesn't mean I have to trust you. Not yet." Selina met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Then trust this. I have more to lose than you do. If we fail, the galaxy burns." By nightfall, they'd reached the outskirts of the rebel outpost. It was hidden within a series of caves, shielded by a cloaking device that distorted the surrounding terrain. Rylan activated a small beacon on his wrist, and moments later, a group of rebels emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on the pair. "Rylan," one of them said, a tall man with a cybernetic arm. "We weren't expecting you." "Who's the alien?" "She's with me," Rylan said, raising his hands to show he wasn't armed. "She has information the Resistance needs. Big information." The rebel leader eyed Selina warily. "We don't work with Ixorians." "You will if you want to stop the Annihilator," Selina said, stepping forward. The rebels tensed, their fingers tightening on their triggers, but she didn't flinch. "I know what the Empire is planning. I can help you stop them." The leader snorted. "And why should we believe you?" Selina raised the crystal, its light illuminating the cave. "Because without me, you won't stand a chance." Inside the rebel base, tensions ran high. Selina explained what she had learned about the Annihilator, its connection to the Ixorian throne, and the Empire's plans to use it to expand their control over the galaxy. The rebels listened in silence, their skepticism evident. "This could be a trap," one of them said. "How do we know she's telling the truth?" "Because I've seen what the Empire is capable of," Ryland said, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "And because if she's right, we don't have time to argue." The leader studied Selina for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "We'll help you. But if you betray us, there won't be anywhere in the galaxy you can hide." Selina inclined her head. "Understood." As the rebels began preparing for the mission to Ixoria Prime, Selina found a quiet corner of the base to collect her thoughts. The crystal rested in her lap, its glow steady and reassuring. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself a moment of hope. "You're really going to do this," Ryland said, approaching her. "Face the Empire. Take back your throne. Destroy the weapon." "I have no choice," Selina said, her voice soft. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone the Empire has hurt, including you." Ryland sat down beside her, his expression thoughtful. "You're not what I expected, Selina." "Neither are you," she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. For a brief moment, the walls between them seemed to crumble. But the sound of distant alarms shattered the peace, and the base was plunged into chaos. "They found us," Ryland said, grabbing his rifle. "We need to move. Now." Selina stood, the crystal glowing brighter in her hand. "Then let's show them what we're capable of." As the rebels scrambled to defend their base, Selina and Ryland prepared for the fight of their lives. The battle for Ixoria Prime, and the fate of the galaxy, was about to begin. The final battle. The skies above Ixoria Prime were a chaotic tapestry of explosions and fire. Rebel ships darted between towering Ixorian warcruisers, their weapons blazing as they fought against the Empire's overwhelming forces. Below, the royal palace loomed, its spires piercing the storm-filled sky. Deep beneath it, hidden in layers of security and secrecy, lay the Annihilator. Ryland piloted their stolen Ixorian shuttle through the thick of the battle, his hands gripping the controls tightly. The ship jolted as enemy fire grazed its hull, but he pressed on, weaving through the chaos with the skill of a seasoned pilot. "Hold it steady." Selina barked from the back of the ship, her voice sharp with urgency. She was strapping on the last piece of her combat gear, her silver eyes glinting with determination. The crystal hung around her neck, its faint glow a reminder of the stakes they faced. "I'm holding it as steady as I can." Ryland shot back, his knuckles white. "But in case you haven't noticed, we're a little outnumbered." "Just get us to the landing zone," Selina said. "The rebels will cover us." As if on cue, a squadron of rebel fighters swooped in, unleashing a volley of missiles that cleared a path to the palace. Ryland seized the opportunity, steering the shuttle into a narrow docking bay. The landing was rough, but they made it. "Time to move," Ryland said, unbuckling his harness. "This is where the fun begins." The palace was eerily quiet, its grand halls echoing with the faint hum of distant alarms. Selina led the way, her movements swift and purposeful. She knew this place intimately. It had once been her home. Now it felt like a tomb. "Where's the weapon?" Ryland asked, keeping his rifle at the ready. "Below the throne room," Selina replied. "There's a hidden elevator that leads to the vault." They moved through the corridors, avoiding patrols and security drones. The palace was a maze of opulence and menace, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting the Empire's victories. Selina couldn't help but feel a pang of anger as she passed them. These walls celebrated a legacy of oppression, one she had once been a part of. When they reached the throne room, Selina hesitated. The massive doors loomed before her, their intricate carvings depicting her ancestors in all their glory. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Whatever's behind that door," Ryland said, his voice softer than usual, "we face it together." Selina nodded and pushed the doors open. The throne room was empty, save for the imposing chair at its center, a monolithic structure of black metal and glowing veins of energy. The air was heavy with power, and the crystal around her neck pulsed in response. She approached the throne, her steps deliberate. Rylan watched her carefully, his finger on the trigger. "You sure about this?" Selena placed her hand on the throne, and the room shuddered. The floor beneath them began to split, revealing a circular platform that descended into the depths of the palace. The elevator activated, carrying them into the heart of the Annihilator. The vault was a vast chamber, its walls lined with glowing conduits that pulsed with energy. At its center stood the Annihilator, a colossal machine that seemed alive. Its core was a swirling vortex of light and shadow, emanating a low, resonant hum that sent chills down Ryland's spine. "Now what?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of the weapon. "We destroy it," Selena said, her gaze fixed on the core. "The crystal is the key. It can deactivate the weapon." Before she could act, the room was flooded with light. Dozens of Exorian soldiers emerged, their weapons trained on the pair. At their head was Kreiner, Selena's former advisor and the architect of her betrayal. "Queen Selena," Kreiner said, his voice dripping with mockery. "How poetic that you've returned to the throne, only to meet your end." Selena stepped forward, her hand tightening around the crystal. "You betrayed me, Kreiner. You betrayed the Empire." "No," Kreiner said, his smile widening. "I saved it. The Annihilator is the future. With it, we will reshape the galaxy. By destroying it," Selena shot back, "by murdering billions. Sacrifices must be made," Kreiner said coldly. "Now, hand over the crystal, or I'll kill your little human friend." Rylan raised his rifle, his expression defiant. "You're welcome to try." Before Kreiner could give the order to fire, Selena acted. She hurled the crystal toward the core, its glow intensifying as it merged with the machine. The Annihilator shuddered violently, its light growing erratic. "Stop her," Kreiner shouted, but it was too late. The weapon began to collapse in on itself, its energy spiraling out of control. The soldiers hesitated, panic spreading through their ranks. Rylan opened fire, creating enough chaos for him and Selena to make their move. "Run," Selena shouted, pulling Rylan toward the elevator. The vault began to implode, the Annihilator's destruction triggering a chain reaction that tore through the palace. As they ascended, the ground beneath them crumbled, and explosions rocked the structure. When they emerged on the surface, the palace was in ruins. The battle in the skies had ceased, the rebels victorious. Selena and Rylan stood amidst the wreckage, their breaths heavy, their bodies battered but alive. "It's over," Rylan said, his voice filled with disbelief. Selena shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "The Empire will retaliate," she said. "They'll see this as an act of war. We have to unite the galaxy if we're going to survive." Rylan smirked. "And let me guess, you're planning to lead the charge?" Selena met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Someone has to." As the first rays of dawn broke over Ixoria Prime, Selena stood tall, a queen no longer bound by the chains of her past. The galaxy had bled, but now it had a chance to heal, and she would see to it that it did.